We now speak to water strategist at the University of the Free State, Dr. Anthony Turton. A very good evening to you and thank you for joining us. Now, water shortages have been an issue here in South Africa for many provinces. Are we in a crisis and how concerned should South Africans be?
South Africa has always been water constrained. One of the earliest books written on water in South Africa was about South Africa's water constraint in the 1800s. So we've managed to manage our way out of our fundamental water shortages by being very clever and very innovative. And we just need to continue to do that. So in a nutshell, the problem in South Africa is that we have a fundamentally water-constrained national economy. That's our problem. So if we want to create jobs and create economic growth and development, what we need to do is transition to a recycling economy. And if we can transition to a recycling economy with a target of 1.6 times by 2035, we can create full employment and have lots of happy faces. So in other words, the total volume of water we have in the country today, if we can recycle that 1.6 times by 2035, we will be able to create full employment, have economic growth, have political stability. It's as simple as that.
Is that possible?
Yes, it is possible because we have to just transition to a recycling economy. And let me explain some of our fundamental constraints for the layperson. If you take over the geographic area of South Africa, a theoretical area, if you take 100 units of rain falling over that area, only 8 units of that end up in the river. We lose 92 units almost immediately to evaporation. So we built large dams up to now, and those large dams have stored water, but with climate change, what's happening is as the temperature is increasing, so is our loss to the environment. Now, our evaporative loss is also increasing. So where we're moving to is where the rest of the world is going now, is instead of storing water in dams on surface, we start looking at storing water underground in aquifers. That's called managed aquifer recharge. It's a technological process. It's being rolled out in different parts of the world extremely successfully, and we have to start moving towards that thing in South Africa. The same thing with sewage. We produce 5 billion litres of sewage every day. 5 billion litres, that's a huge amount of sewage. If we start moving to a recycling approach, Singapore, for example, recycles all of its sewage. It recovers the water 100% out of sewage. Perth in Western Australia is currently recovering 120 megalitres of sewage every single day, treating it to the highest standard of potable. So once again, we're moving to a recycling economy. And if we can understand that and move towards that at a policy level, then we're going to have lots of happy, smiling faces in the country.
Is government on the right track, considering what you've just said?
Yes, I've got a very high regard for the Minister. The Minister's doing two things that are very important and the public needs to know about. That we want to get angry at all these sorts of things, but the important thing that people need to know is that the Minister is currently leading an evidence-based policy reform process. And it's because of that evidence-based policy reform that she's now starting to grasp the fact that business as usual is no longer an option. So as we transition from business as usual to business unusual, we have to bring the entire water sector with us. So all of the engineers that have made a livelihood out of building dams now have to start building aquifers, manage aquifers, completely different mindset. So it's a journey, it's not just a final destination. So I'm very encouraged by the fact that we're talking now about groundwater as an increasingly important resource. Rainwater harvesting, very, very important aspect. But there, once again, we need to go a little bit further because the current policy and procedures of, for example, the building codes don't actually cater for that. Yesterday I was talking to some of the big property owners in Johannesburg, and they want to transition to rainwater harvesting, but there are no national building codes that say if you're going to do this, this is the standard that you must apply. So it's a journey we're on. We pointed in the right direction. I'm very confident that with the Minister's leadership, we're going to get there. And what we really need to do now in the time of crisis is actually muster around this vision. We have to concretize that vision and focus ultimately on this very simple thing. We're a water-constrained economy. Okay, we have to transition to a recycling economy in the future, and our target is 1.6 times by 2035. That in a nutshell is really what the mission's about.
The Minister also spoke about large-scale desalination.
Yes.
Do we have the resources to get that done?
Well, desalination, once again, is it's not emergent, it's a mainstream technology in other parts of the world. For desalination, there are a couple of things that you need. You need a large volume of salty water, so we've got an ocean around our shores. You then need lots and lots of energy, because it's a very energy-intensive enterprise. We have an energy constraint. So if you're going to desalinate seawater, say Durban, you can't necessarily pump that up to Johannesburg because of the energy requirement. You can technically do it, but because we don't have surplus energy, we can't do it. So it's never going to be one silver bullet that sorts out all the problems. We're going to have, much like in the energy sector, you're going to have a mix of technologies. So you'll have desalination at the coast, Cape Town, Durban, Port Elizabeth. In fact, I was at the opening of one of the largest desalination plants in Namibia about 2 years ago at a place called Trekkoppie, and that's literally one of the largest desalination plants in the SADC region. We hear very little about it, but extremely sophisticated plant. So desalination absolutely is the way to go. Whether desalination, for example, in Gauteng of acid mine drainage, whether that's the right solution, that's entirely another problem, because when you desalinate water, all the stuff you take out, you have to dispose of. And if you're at the ocean, you just dispose of it into the ocean. But if you're up in the middle of the continent, you have to build very sophisticated dams to hold this nasty stuff in perpetuity. So once again, it's strokes for folks. It's different technologies at different places, much like the energy mix.
You spoke about the quality of groundwater. How concerned are you about fracking then in the Karoo?
Fracking, I've recently been speaking to some of the industry leaders, and the very interesting thing about fracking now is that because of the great public concern that's been shown about fracking, there's been a significant amount of research done on fracking. So as a result of that, we're starting to learn more and more about groundwater resources in the country. So an unintended contest of the protests around fracking has been the deepening of our scientific knowledge of groundwater. Groundwater is a very significant resource. South Africa, unfortunately, because of our geology, we're not blessed with major groundwater resources like you find in other parts of the world. However, where we do have it, it's a very significant resource, and it's something that needs to be managed properly.
The Minister also commended South Africans for heeding the call and being responsible during this dry time. What else can South Africans do to conserve water? Well,
the significant thing about South Africa at the moment, in a very polarized society, building up to a national, provincial, municipal election, the one thing about water is that it unites people. Because we've got a common, a common need for water and almost common cultural practices around water. It's the one thing that can unite us. So I'd like to put that forward as our national challenge. There's so many things that divide us, but our common dependence on water is the one thing that can unite us. And if you look at the Netherlands, the whole democratic process in the Netherlands, because they're under sea level, they live below sea level, their entire democracy is based on the evolution of what they call waterschappen. And a waterschap is a kind of water users association where people are jointly involved in pumping water out of their polders to prevent them from being inundated. And that has become the foundation, literally, of the entire democracy today. You have a similar thing in Spain, where it's an irrigation agriculture, where through the evolution of water management, you've actually got a very specific form of democracy there. So once again, as part of the deepening of our democracy experiment in South Africa, water has the potential to play a very important role because it unites more than it divides.
Thank you very much for your time and your insight. That was water strategist Dr. Anthony Turton talking to us about saving water, storing water, and whether